According to the divine principle, Eve's romantic sexual relationship with the archangel Lucifer when they ate the fruit together resulted in a spiritual dominion that Satan had over the firstborn son Cain. That's why Cain looks at Abel the way Adam was looked at by Lucifer. Cain looks at Abel with the same jealousy that Lucifer looked at Adam, which is the same jealousy that Pharisees looked at Jesus. And it's the same jealousy that Christians looked at Reverend Moon in his heyday. And what can you do with this revelation? Well, other than show some favoritism for your favorite pontiff and all of this juvenile stuff, you can really think about the idea that Cain and Abel, as far as God is concerned, wants to embrace them like brothers. However, they both have two different sensibilities and approach to the concept of right and wrong. Now, Cain, he sort of transposes Lucifer's emotions into a form of Marxism, okay, where he's looking for equality of outcome. And because he's not getting the equality of outcome, he then kills his brother, right? But the legitimate side of what he's doing as the emotionally younger son, he's the chronologically older son, but he's emotionally younger or less developed because he doesn't have the spiritual guide, Lucifer, to help him overcome what Lucifer couldn't overcome. So he's a little bit retarded by that relationship. And so he can't overcome his coping problem. And so anyway, God actually sees these people with this inclination as the younger son. And the legitimate side of their gripe is the material side of life. It is actually an important side of life. Materialism is an important side of life. There are a lot of spiritual people who have almost no respect for material things sometimes. And even some Christians will say, his kingdom is not of this earth. His kingdom is not, meaning that if the whole world goes to shit, it's okay because, you know, Jesus' kingdom was not of this earth. Incidentally, Jesus didn't mean that his kingdom is not of the physical plane. He meant that his kingdom is not of the current climate and political structure and cultural level of awareness. Okay, Jesus was at odds with that world. Okay, so his kingdom was not of that world. That world rejected him when he said the time was at hand to receive him. They did not receive him. Therefore, he went the way of the cross. What is the will of God? That you receive him whom he had sent. So God sent Jesus and people did not receive him, even though the will of God was for him to be received. All right. Well, anyway, even behind that story, you have the reigning immaturity of Cain, which caused the crucifixion, right? And God, through Reverend Moon, was saying that the destruction of Cain is not the ultimate hope of God. God, being a parent, wants to deal with his elder son and his younger son the way parents deal with them. And so instead of a right-wing leaning God, he is not left-wing leaning God. He's not all about compassion and no principle, and he's not all about principle with no compassion. This may ring a bell of George Bush's concept of compassionate conservatism, which the guy who coined the phrase compassionate conservatism said George Bush didn't get it right. Anyway, Reverend Moon made the philosophy of headwing. Headwing. And what that means is that both right-wing, especially right-wing extreme concept, where it's principle only, and left-wing extreme, where it's like hedonism, it's total material and physical desires and materialism, that both of these things are going to be embraced by a parent who loves both brothers, and that the parent would find a balanced, he has a balanced philosophy and use a balanced strategy to deal with the issues of both brothers. And this concept is called headwing, which also doubles as something called parentism. In other words, if you had a Cain type child and an Abel type child, and you had a heart of a parent for both of them, you would seek out a certain kind of strategy that the parent of these two kids would be concerned with. And that is called headwing. It is ideal parentism. Now, I tend to think that when Reverend Moon talked about headwing and parentism, the right and the left were, people on the right were almost blinded by principles, late 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s. And people on the left were kind of like blinded by materialism. But what happened was the media took over, and by chastising the right came more towards the center, and the center became known as right. So if you were to tell me who's closer to the headwing ideology that could find a way or agonize to find a way to love both brothers, both sons, in a real headwing or centrist utopian or centrist form of perfection for both sides. I'm not talking about Satanism. I'm just talking about material life as a gift from God and spiritual life as a gift from God being harmonized in the fullness of the gift of our existence from God. I'm not talking about anything satanic. So a lot of times people conflate the material with the satanic. Now, the base of operations, the way that Satan normally uses to twist you into some sort of a temptation is physical stuff. But physical stuff were made by God. So we can't just God has no intention of giving the entire physical world to Satan. He didn't make it. He just gained control of it by gaining control over the descendants of Adam and Eve. Okay. So God has no intention of allowing Satan to perpetually warp the purpose of the physical world. Okay. So materialism is not in and of itself ungodly. Okay. So, well, actually, materialism is ungodly if you're worshiping material. But having plans that encompass, material processes is totally okay. Anyway, this idea of headwing is something that among me and my friends we kick around, and out of respect for Reverend Moon on the one end, but on the other end, a real concern for mankind, as most of us have gained some concern about the future of mankind and our children, just like many of you, especially conservatives who are more likely to have intentionally had their children than people who practice free sex, of course. But this idea of headwing, I do believe, is more likely to be championed by the right, the current right, not the old right from the 80s, but the new right that has learned to incorporate certain forms of pragmatism and principles of sovereignty and stuff like that. They're more balanced. Also, the idea that you're going to let yourself be smacked on the cheek, which is a highfalutin spiritual standard of Christians, is not practical when your countries are being invaded. It's almost like something that God gave you. You're willing to give it back as a show of love to somebody who doesn't love you. Once we mature past that, I think the form of compassion that the right is on the edge of is closer to Headwing. But I just thought, the aftermath of Charlie Kirk has gotten everybody thinking about what comes next. And hey, this is my way of saying me and some of my friends do believe in the ideology or the concept or the proposition called headwing. And maybe you should think about that too, because maybe the idea could guide you. It is a pretty practical thing, which means markets are going to turn that way. It's the way of the future. And it's not like, I have to turn the other cheek in order to go to heaven. It's not that kind of world. It is not that kind of motivation. Okay. It is the kind of motivation that will deal with you if you're a bad person and treat you like a bad person, but will always remember that God wanted to find a way to rehabilitate you or figure out how you came about and figure out how to create some sort of solution for if there's some likelihood that you're going to be a repeat case. Okay. Anyway, I think you get the idea. There is something to think about beyond the conflict of right and left. And there is an ideal positioning of our minds as we consider this, and that's called headwing. It's not right wing. It's not left wing. It's not total materialism. It's not total spirituality. It is the harmonizing of the world with the mind of a parent that wants to do the best thing for our offspring. Parentism.